Hello, everyone, and welcome to Psi 440. Your personality is one of your most important assets. Everyone has a personality, and yours will help you determine the boundaries of your success and how satisfied or happy you are with your life. It has already helped to shape your experiences up to now, and it will continue to do so for the rest of your life. Your personality can limit or expand your options and choices in life. In this course, we will be studying the forces and factors that shape your personality. We will cover a variety of theories that answer some basic questions about personality and human nature. Psychologists differ among themselves as to the meaning of personality. Most agree that the word personality originated from the Latin persona, which referred to a theatrical mask worn by Roman actors in Greek dramas. However, personality theorists have not agreed on a single definition of personality. So, various theories have evolved because of this lack of agreement and the unique perspectives of the theorists. Although no single definition is acceptable to all personality theorists, one can say that personality is a pattern of relatively permanent traits and unique characteristics that give both consistency and individuality to a person's behavior. Traits contribute to individual differences in behavior, consistency of behavior over time, and stability of behavior across situations. Characteristics are unique qualities of an individual. Research has shown that personality traits are largely determined by heredity and not easily changed. Characteristics are more malleable because they are based on beliefs such as honesty and treating others with respect, and these beliefs can change over time. A scientific theory is a set of related assumptions that allow scientists to use logical deductive reasoning to formulate testable hypotheses. Theories must be testable and falsifiable. The word theory has the dubious distinction of being one of the most misused and misunderstood words in the English language. In science, theories are tools used to generate research and organize observations, but neither truth nor fact has a place in scientific terminology. Science is the search for knowledge, and so-called scientific facts are often temporary truths that may be refutable by future observations. However, some theories may become testable later. The greatest criticism of the psychoanalytic approach is that it is unscientific in its analysis of human behavior. Many of the concepts central to Freud's theories are subjective, and as such, difficult to test scientifically. For example, how is it possible to scientifically study concepts like the unconscious mind? In this respect, it could be argued that Freud's perspective is unfalsifiable, as its theories cannot be empirically investigated. However, cognitive psychology has identified unconscious processes, such as procedural memory and automatic processing. Such empirical findings have demonstrated the role of unconscious processes in human behavior. People sometimes confuse theory with philosophy or speculation or hypothesis or taxonomy. Although theory is related to each of these concepts, it is not the same as any of them. First, theory is related to philosophy, but it is a much narrower term. Philosophy encompasses several branches, one of which is epistemology, or the nature of knowledge. Theory relates most closely to this branch of philosophy because it is a tool used by scientists in their pursuit of knowledge. Theories rely on speculation, but they are much more than mere armchair speculation. They are closely tied to empirically gathered data and to science. Science is the branch of study concerned with observation and classification of data and with the verification of general laws through the testing of hypotheses. A good theory is capable of generating many hypotheses. A hypothesis is an educated guess or prediction specific enough for its validity to be tested through the use of the scientific method. A taxonomy is a classification of things according to their natural relationships. Taxonomies are essential to the development of a science because without classification of data, science could not grow. In psychology, a couple of examples of taxonomies are defense mechanisms. and the Big Five taxonomy of personality traits of McCrae and Costa, the five-factor model, which we will be studying in this course. At this point, you should understand that the goal of science is to develop and test theories. Scientists and philosophers argue about what a theory really is and what a good theory looks like. Some of the formal definitions include a set of principles that explains and predicts many, but not all, observed relationships within a given domain of inquiry. A formalized set of concepts that organizes observations and inferences and predicts and explains phenomena. There are many more definitions, but they generally come down to these basic parts. They explain nature, predict events, tell us what to look for and how to look, and tell us what our data mean. Now, good theories go beyond just answering why. They are able to predict events given the necessary information. A theory which can tell us why ice forms is helpful, but not really useful if it can't predict when it will form. Psychological theories are better at explaining why than at making predictions, in part because behavior is multiply determined. That is, it is the result of many complicated intersecting and interacting factors. Consequently, psychologists generally agree that personality can be best explained by several different theories. Alternate theories exist because the very nature of a theory allows the theorist to make speculations from a particular point of view. Theorists must be as objective as possible when gathering data, but their decisions as to what data are collected and how these data are interpreted are personal ones. All theories are a reflection of their authors' personal backgrounds, childhood experiences, philosophy of life, interpersonal relationships, and unique manner of looking at the world. Because observations are colored by the individual observer's frame of reference, it follows that there may be many diverse theories. Psychologists have long recognized that some personality theories have a subjective component, which may reflect events in the theorist's life as a sort of disguised autobiography. The theorist may draw on these events as a source of data to describe and support his or her theory. No matter how hard scientists try to be impartial and objective, their personal viewpoint is likely to influence their perceptions to some degree. This should not surprise us. Personality theorists are human too, as we shall see, and like most of us, they sometimes find it hard to accept ideas that diverge from their own experience. In order to understand a personality theory fully, then, we should learn something about the life of the person who proposed it. It is important to consider how the development of a theory may have been influenced by specific events in a theorist's life. That is why you'll find biographical information on the various theorists at the beginning of each chapter. One of the primary functions of scientific theory is to describe and explain how the world works. Psychologists attempt to explain how human thought, emotion, motivation, and behavior work. Yet, human personality is so complex that many different perspectives have developed on how to best explain it. Beginning with Freud, psychoanalytic and then the more general psychodynamic approaches have focused on the importance of early childhood experience and on the relationship with parents as guiding forces that shape personality development. Psychoanalysis traditionally used dream interpretation to uncover the unconscious thoughts, feelings, and impulses as a main form of treatment of neurosis and mental illness. Psychoanalytic theorists include Adler, Jung, and Klein. The primary assumption of the humanistic, currently known as positive psychology approach, and the existential approach is that people strive toward meaning, growth, well-being, happiness, and psychological health. States of positive emotion and happiness foster psychological health and pro-social behavior. These theorists include Maslow, Rogers, and May. Dispositional theorists argue that the unique and long-term tendencies to behave in particular ways are the essence of one's personality. These unique dispositions, such as extroversion or anxiety, are called traits. These theorists include Allport and McRae and Costa. Behavior, thought, feelings, and personality are influenced by differences in basic genetic, epigenetic, and neurological systems between individuals. Now, this is the biological perspective. The reason some people have different traits, dispositions, and ways of thinking stems from differences in their genotype and central nervous system. These theorists include Eysenck and Buss. All behaviors are learned through association and or its consequences. This is the learning perspective. To shape desired behavior, people must understand and then establish the conditions that bring about those particular behaviors. The cognitive perspective argues that how people think about themselves and other people, as well as the assumptions they make and the strategies they use for solving problems, are the keys to understanding differences between people. These theorists include Skinner and Bandura. What makes a theory useful? A useful theory has a mutual and dynamic interaction with research data. Ongoing research will confirm the theory or suggest changes. A useful theory generates research, is falsifiable, organizes data, guides action, is internally consistent, and is parsimonious. The most important criterion of a useful theory is its ability to stimulate and guide further research. A useful theory will generate two different kinds of research: descriptive research and hypothesis testing. Descriptive research, which can expand an existing theory, is concerned with the measurement, labeling, and categorization of the units employed in theory building. It's concerned with the structure of the theory. The second kind of research generated by a useful theory, hypothesis testing, leads to an indirect verification of the usefulness of the theory. A theory must also be evaluated on its ability to be confirmed or disconfirmed. That is, it must be falsifiable. To be falsifiable, a theory must be precise enough to suggest research that may either support or fail to support its major tenets. A useful theory should also be able to organize those research data that are not incompatible with each other. Without some organization or classification, research findings would remain isolated and meaningless. A fourth criterion of a useful theory is its ability to guide the practitioner over the rough course of day-to-day problems. For example, parents, teachers, business managers, and psychotherapists are confronted continually with an avalanche of questions for which they try to find workable solutions. Good theory provides a structure for finding many of those answers. Without a useful theory, practitioners would stumble in the darkness of trial and error techniques. With a sound theoretical orientation, they can discern a suitable course of action. A useful theory need not be consistent with other theories, but it must be consistent with itself. An internally consistent theory is one whose components are logically compatible. Its limitations are carefully defined, and it does not offer explanations that lie beyond the scope of limitations. Also, an internally consistent theory uses language in a consistent manner. That is, it doesn't use the same term to mean two different things, nor does it use two separate terms to refer to the same concept. A good theory will use concepts and terms that have been clearly and operationally defined. An operational definition is one that defines units in terms of observable events or behaviors that can be measured. A researcher studying depression could operationally define depression as scores on the Beck Depression Inventory. When two theories are equal in their ability to generate research, be falsified, give meaning to data, guide the practitioners, be self-consistent, the simpler one is preferred. This is the law of parsimony. The simpler theory is said to be parsimonious. As we move on, an important aspect of any personality theory is the image of human nature it represents. Each theorist has a conception of human nature that addresses the big issues of what it means to be human. For centuries, poets, philosophers, and artists have phrased and rephrased these questions, and we see their attempts at answers in our great books and paintings. Personality theorists, too, have addressed these troubling questions and have reached no greater consensus than the artists or the writers have. Personality theories differ on basic issues concerning the nature of humanity. Each personality theory reflects its author's assumptions about humanity. These assumptions rest on several broad dimensions that separate the various personality theorists. The first dimension is determinism versus free choice. Theorists on both sides of this issue ask, are we victims of past experiences, biological factors, unconscious factors, or external stimuli, forces over which we have no control? Or are we masters of our own fate? A second issue is one of pessimism versus optimism. This issue reflects a theorist's basic outlook on life. Are human beings basically good or evil, kind or cruel, compassionate or cold? A third dimension for viewing a theorist's concept of humanity is causality versus teleology. Briefly, causality holds that behavior is a function of past experiences, where teleology is an explanation of behavior in terms of future goals or purposes. A fourth consideration that divides personality theorists is their attitude toward conscious versus unconscious determinants of behavior. The fifth question is one of biological versus social influences on personality. This is the age-old nature-nurture debate. What is more important, inherited traits and attributes, or the nurturing features of our environment? A sixth issue is uniqueness versus similarities. We may think of personality as so individual that no other person is equivalent. Other theorists may allow for uniqueness, but also see universal patterns of behavior that are accepted within a particular culture. These and other basic issues that separate personality theorists have resulted in truly different personality theories. As I've mentioned, the primary criterion for a useful theory is its ability to generate research. Theories and research data have a cyclic relationship. Theory gives meaning to data, and data result from experimental research designed to test hypotheses generated by the theory. Two types of reasoning are used in research, inductive and deductive. Deductive reasoning works from the more general to the more specific. Sometimes this is called a top-down approach. We might begin with an established theory about our topic of interest. We then narrow that down into more specific hypotheses that we can test. We narrow that down even further when we collect observations to address the hypotheses. This ultimately leads us to be able to test the hypotheses with specific data, a confirmation or not of the original theory. Inductive reasoning works the other way, moving from specific observations to broader generalizations and theories. We sometimes call this a bottom-up approach. In inductive reasoning, we begin with specific observations and measures, then begin to detect patterns and regularities, and formulate some tentative hypotheses that we can explore, and finally end up developing some general conclusions or theories. These two methods of reasoning have a very different feel to them when you're conducting research. Inductive reasoning, by its very nature, is more open-ended and exploratory. Deductive reasoning is more narrow in nature and is concerned with testing or confirming hypotheses. Human behavior is complicated, and as a result, it is quite difficult to predict. To improve their ability to predict, personality psychologists have developed a number of assessment techniques, including personality inventories. For these techniques to be useful, they must be both reliable and valid. The reliability of a measuring instrument is the extent to which it yields consistent results. Suppose you took the same test on 2 different days and received 2 widely different scores. How would you know which score is the most accurate one? A test like that would not be considered reliable because its results were so inconsistent. No one could depend on that test for an adequate assessment of your personality. It is common to find some slight variation in scores when a test is taken a second time, but if the variation is large, then something is wrong with the test. Now, personality inventories may be reliable and yet lack validity or accuracy. Validity is the degree to which an instrument measures what it is supposed to measure. Does an intelligence test truly measure intelligence? Does a test of anxiety actually evaluate anxiety? If a test does not measure what it claims to, then it is not valid, and its results cannot be used to predict behavior. For example, your score on an invalid intelligence test, no matter how high, will be useless for predicting how well you will do in college or in any other situation that requires a high level of intelligence. A personality test that is not valid may provide a totally misleading portrait of your emotional strengths and weaknesses and will be of no value to you or a potential employer. Now, two important types of validity are described in the text: construct and predictive. Construct validity refers to whether a personality test actually measures what it says it does. And three important types of construct validity are described in the text. Often unexpected variables can interfere with how well the assessment instrument measures what it intends to measure. Predictive validity refers to whether a test actually predicts a future behavior. For example, how likely is it for a pre-employment test or personality assessment to predict future job performance?